For over 25 years, Michael Dertouzos has been director of MIT's Lab for Computer Science. The lab has been responsible for some of the most significant developments in computing and is currently home to the World Wide Web Consortium. Dertouzos has also been on the front line of the information revolution as a professor, an engineer, and an author. In his most recent book, The Unfinished Revolution, he calls for more human-centric computers. I'm pleased to have him on this program. Welcome.
Welcome.
Tell me what you mean by human-centric computers.
Human-centered or human-centric computer is really a computer that serves you instead of you serving it, which is what we're doing today.
Meaning what? That we are slaves to the complexity of computers?
Absolute. When you're pressing that button and you hear the automated operator saying, if you want marketing, press 1. If you want engineering, press 2. I see a learned human being, Charlie Rose, at the tentacles of a $50 computer executing instructions dispensed by this machine. You know, you proclaim it your master 150 years after the abolition of slavery. It's ridiculous.
Why is it?
It is natural. We are in a new technology, and at the beginning it's natural to pay attention to what we can do without really making sure we can do it well. But after a while, it sets in as habit, and that's where we're now. We've been doing this for 30, 35 years, and it's time we make a radical shift and build our systems and use them in ways that are human-centered.
But, you know, what's interesting about this is that people like Steve Case at AOL
I know Steve.
has talked frequently about the reason for the success of AOL was that they constantly emphasized being user-friendly.
Yes.
And that was why they ended up in the place that they did.
Yes.
Simplification, ease of use is a very compelling marketing idea.
It is, but let me tell you that what people have been calling user-friendly is really not what I'm talking about. They've been, you know, painting the trash can slightly different colors to make it look better, but it's still an odious trash can. I'm interested in you being able to speak to your machine, Charlie. I don't want you to type.
I understand that, but your friend, Bill Gates, has been working on voice simplification, for voice recognition and voice for a number of years. Why haven't we had it?
Very good question to ask. Not only he, the rest of the world has been, and it's been overpromised for the past 15 years. And the answer, overpromised, meaning that people said, here it is, it's ready, and it wasn't ready. People hyped it. The scientists, the techies, people like myself, hyped it earlier, and it wasn't ready. Now the technology is ready. It's bursting at the seams. In my center, I have systems that understand you. You can go up, you don't have to train them, you can ask them any question about the weather, you can ask them any question you want about arriving flights, about navigating in a city, the traffic in downtown Boston, and you get answers.
So give me your vision for a computer system that is built around users.
Well, instead of being at that very low mechanistic level where today's machines are, it's up at your level, and it first understands you when you speak to it. That's very powerful. The second thing it does is it helps you automate things that you want to do. So if you say, if Mary calls me or sends me a message, please alert me unless I'm on vacation. That is a little automation thing that your computer can learn to sit there and do, check all the messages coming in and the phone calls, and if Mary calls, pass it to you. From that simple thing all the way to the health profession, to government, to education, the kinds of things that we could automate today are huge. We could increase human productivity by 300%.
What's the most human-centric company that you know?
Apple has started, when they started, they were in that direction. They were trying. And as you've said earlier, Steve Case and AOL started on that line. But compared to where I would like to go, they're really scratching the surface, and then Apple got complicated. After a while, it got complicated.
Created its own problems and almost destroyed itself in the process.
Indeed.
Until Jobs came back.
Indeed, it did. But, you know, going back to some of these things like speech, you know, nobody has introduced speech yet in a decent way. And I really want you to think of what this means in terms of the world. Today, where only 5% of the people are interconnected. And the Chinese have these 100,000 ideograms
Yeah.
So they can't have keyboards because the keyboards would be as big as your house.
Right.
So, but with speech, the internet opens to them, computing opens to them, and they can get the same benefits we can. That's 1 billion people. And then the one that really interests me is the people who can't read or write. They can still speak and listen. They can get health care, they can get agricultural help, and speech does this. So I think there's some powerful human-centered things beyond just the ease of use. It's really the potential of this information revolution and what people can do with it.
Do you consider this the greatest unfulfilled promise of computers?
Absolutely, and as I say there, the revolution will not be finished until we get there. Because today, we really are barely, I would say we're 5% up the possibilities. And I'm speaking qualitatively, not quantitatively. We're doing very little today.
Where is the future leadership coming from in terms of understanding these kinds of things like technology? Is it coming from the campus like MIT or Stanford or
it's a mixture.
University of Texas or
Yeah,
whatever it might
it's
be?
a mixture. As always, the very long leaps are coming from academia because only academia can afford to look 10 years in the future. The companies are more responsible for the 3 to 5 year leaps. And it's usually a combination. You get a thing like the web. Where did the web come from? You had Tim Berners-Lee, my good friend, in your program. He did it alone in a basement in Geneva at a company that had no idea what he was doing.
And then it got a significant lift up because of the Defense Department.
Well, it got a lift up because it really captured the world.
Yeah.
And he was able to use the internet to spread the web, and then suddenly millions of people had access to this software. They put it on their machines, and lo and behold, they found they were interconnected, and this new thing erupted.
In the future, how do you think most people will access the internet?
I think most people are going to not see their computers. Let me explain this. When you go to your home today, you don't say, I'm going to put the milk in the motorized cooling agent. You say, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. And you say, I'm going to put the pencil in the pencil sharpener. I'm going to take the elevator. I'm going to take the car. So the various uses of the motors, that previous revolution's things, are invisible to you. You only see their functions. You see what they do, refrigerator, sharpener, and all. This revolution won't be finished until the computer vanishes, and you don't see it. So when you say, how do you access it? You access it from your room. We're sitting here, and you want to get some information, you turn around, and you say, when is the next flight to San Francisco? You use a favorite alert.
Does it appear on a screen, or does the voice tell you?
Well, if you are healthy and all your faculties are working and your perceptual abilities are there, you can get it any way you want. You can get it on a gigantic screen. You can get it on a small screen in your pocket. If you're impaired, you might say, disable my visual aids, and I'm going to take it on an acoustical medium, or I'm going to take it on a Braille reader. So the idea is not for you to go to the temple of the computer, bow, and lean forward and start doing things, but lean back and have an interaction that's as natural as going to the refrigerator for your milk.
Or having a conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know where that would be significant, and no company yet has been able to, I think, bridge this gap, although many have tried. It is in healthcare.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's the first thing I write about here. It's the biggest. There is so much in healthcare that can be automated, given to speech. I mean, take an example. The doctor wants to say something about the x-ray. Today, the x-ray has to go one copy to the home physician, another one to the archives, another one to the patient. All this can be automated. The physician does repetitive dog work that they could do just by giving a spoken command, and that would free them up to give us more eyeball-to-eyeball time. I mean, I hate to have only 8 minutes of eyeball-to-eyeball time. So medicine, because it has so much in terms of a use and need of technology and information, you're correct, the prime candidate.
That, and also the fact that people at home can communicate with a healthcare provider with the ease of not having to go out of home and not having to dial up and not being so complex that they shy away from using it. So especially seniors, who need to be comforted about their medical care, and so that if they feel some pain, there is a possibility of some kind of connection.
Again, right on. For example, take the notion of a television camera
Right.
surveying you.
Right.
Normally, that's a bad thing. You don't like it. But what if it's surveying your aging mother?
Yes.
And if she falls in the apartment, immediately help comes.
Right.
Or you get that information and nobody else. So I think we have to be a little more flexible about what can and cannot be done.
Frequently people talk about this idea that the internet revolution will only have finished itself, will only have reached maturity.
Yes.
Reached maturity when we view it like we do electricity.
And that's very similar to what I'm saying to you. When we start looking at all the computers and the internet and all these capabilities around us, the way we look today at motors. I really like motors because each of us has hundreds of motors in our homes and we don't know it. They've vanished. So it really has to vanish, and their functions have to come in place of the hoopla and the fads of today. Because today people say, oh, look, I'm using a computer, but they're not. They're shoveling.
How do you use a computer?
First of all, I have about 8 computers. They're in networks. I am connected to them in my car, in my boat, in my home, in my office.
In your car?
No.
How do you connect in your car? You mean in terms of some computer that's part of your car mechanism, or one that you have there that you operate yourself?
You'll get it if I give you a little quiz.
All right.
What's the biggest thing I said is going to make machines simplified and great?
Voice recognition.
You got it. I speak to my computers.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Now, is this because a particular car company provided this, or you...
No, I pick up my telephone,
Okay.
and I call the computers in my lab.
Ah.
And I say, like, for example, I'm coming to New York today.
Right.
I called and I said, what is the weather like in New York City?
And what happened?
And it says sunny, temperature so-and-so, and if I wanted, I could say, give it to me in Celsius. I could say, how about tomorrow? How about long-range forecast? So you see, I'm using my computer, but already you almost were not prepared to accept this as a use of a computer because it's a very natural kind of thing.
What do you think is the best economic opportunity for people, for technology?
The best economic opportunity? Well, technology is this gigantic jet aircraft that doubles every 2 or 3 years in its capabilities, and the humans are these rocks standing still for thousands of years. We're not changing. And the biggest opportunity is when the two come in alignment. So when do they come in alignment? Very rarely. If you ask me sort of my short-term forecast for the next 3 or 4 years, I would say speech is a very big area. Speech understanding.
Okay, we've established that.
There are 300 startups in the United States today in speech recognition, speech understanding, and the like.
Yeah, but Microsoft's trying to create the software, are they not?
Well, Microsoft is one company pursuing an approach, and there is a lot more happening out there.
More advanced than they are, even though they've been working on it for a long time?
There is a lot happening at Philips, at IBM, at Microsoft, and in 200 startups. And you don't really know what's advanced until, the thing is done and we start seeing applications.
What do you think when will be the most dramatic use of the internet in the future?
Oddly enough, the most dramatic use is the most invisible use. But if you want an economically dramatic use, I think the redistribution of labor is huge. The ability of Indians to serve British, Americans, Australians at a distance and regain some of the economic might. They're very poor.
Right.
And the British taught them English to dominate them. Now they can use English to economically dominate the masters. There's a fascinating poetry there. There is a big, big possibility there, big discombobulation in the ability to sell and buy human work across national boundaries. I think automation, to me, holds the biggest promise for the utilitarian productivity improvement. We increased our productivity 300% in the industrial age, the last wave of it. And we stand to increase it by another 300%. What are we going to do with all this time we save? We're going to work hard?
What's the role of government in all this?
The role of government is to provide infrastructure in a minimal level and regulations. And the United States government, shy as it is in all such things, is not doing enough. Cross-border crimes. What happens if somebody lures your child from Finland? Do we have an agreement between Finland and the United States to prosecute? Taxation. What happens when 1/3 of our commercial activity is on the network? It'll have to be taxed. Nations will not forego their taxes. How
that was a small issue in the political campaign.
Yeah, but I think when we understand how big this is becoming,
Right.
because you see, people focus only on content. They focus on entertainment, video, content, AOL. They don't see the bigger picture of $5 trillion of human labor crossing national boundaries. When that starts, 1/3 of office work is going to be on the nets. And that's going to make content. What does content mean when I'm selling my services to you or you're selling your services to me?
What about this? I think the thing that constantly, when I talk to people in government in Washington,
Sure.
especially in the national security area,
Yes.
they worry
Absolutely.
probably more about cyber terrorism
Yes.
than any other issue.
It's a very real threat, and I can give you some information and some comfort.
All right.
The information is that indeed it's possible for people to, first of all, be predators after your children, try to steal your money from your bank accounts, and try to terrorize you individually or nationally. All these things are possibilities. Just as much as they're possible to do this, so are the counter forces. In other words, this is a zero-sum game. The governments and the institutions can set up defenses, and equally intelligent people on both sides have what in war is called measures and countermeasures. So that's the first comfort. The second comfort I can offer you is that the problems are not in the technology, as we all well know. They're in the human beings who use it. And I haven't seen in history a change in the ratio of angels to devils. I think the ratio is the same. So there's going to be as much good and as much bad in the future as we have today. So I do not get unduly alarmed, although we have to be very cautious about protecting ourselves.
Is an aptitude for mathematics akin to an aptitude for computer science?
Not necessarily.
Really?
We used to think this in the early days of
Yeah,
computing.
I would have thought that.
We thought mathematics was it.
Yeah.
And then others thought engineering was it. And then others thought, you know, it was this. You know, computers and computer science and software is not like anything else. That's why 18-year-olds succeed so well in it. They don't have the baggage of experience behind them. So it's more
So is that why
like
children
itself. It's like
grasp it
itself.
quickly, like languages?
Yes, yes. It has certain rules, a programming language. You know what each statement does. A young person can learn this very fast.
Yeah.
And then in this little world of what each command does, this young person can craft a beautiful edifice, whether it's an adventure game or something much more sophisticated. And that's why you see the 18-year-olds being such crack programmers.
Much has been written and much has been considered about the idea, because the internet transcends national boundaries and nation states,
Indeed.
that it will play some significant role. We know, for example, you know, that the certain countries
Yes.
who are less than democratic in their political
Yes.
structure
Yes.
are scared to death
Yes. And they ought to be.
of the internet.
They ought to be. Because the internet will play a great democratization role. And not for the obvious reason. Obviously, it'll play because it's...
The
it
obvious
crosses
reason is that more people have information,
Yeah,
and therefore
yeah,
they will be
yeah.
able to
That's the obvious
act.
reason.
Right.
But there is a less obvious, far more subtle and pervasive reason. The nations of the world, all of them, however dictatorial they may be, they want to join the economic ascent.
Right.
And who is running the books on the economic ascent? The primarily democratic, wealthy countries
Right.
of the world. They set the rules. So if, Mr. Dictator, you want to play by the rules of the economic game of the big boys and girls, you better start observing the democratic principles therein.
Yeah, but that, you and I can talk about that. I mean, a couple of things about that issue. One is the notion of a lot of them found themselves, you know, buying into the idea of a free market,
Yes.
not having some necessity for structure and regulation,
Yeah,
and
and then they
falling victim to
I think you're
currency
talking about
traders.
the Soviet Union.
Well, I'm talking about
Soviet
that, or I'm
Union,
talking about
yeah.
Malaysia and other places
Yeah,
where they became, capitalism and free market became a dirty word
Yeah.
because they felt like that those people with little concern for their country were moving capital in and out.
But that is a different issue. It's the issue of trying to move into a new way of doing things rapidly without understanding how to do it. And you can no faster move from a repressive regime to a free market and a democracy rapidly than you can make other kinds of move. For example, skip the
you-
Industrial
No,
Revolution.
no, you're saying you have to walk before you can run.
Oh, yeah, you need decades of acculturation. You got to learn how to do it. I mean, society has an inertia to it.
And shock therapy doesn't necessarily make it happen.
Oh, I don't believe in shock therapy when it comes to humans. We're rocks. We haven't been changing much.
Yeah.
We have the same intellectual, physical, and emotional status we had thousands of years ago, Charlie.
Name me.
Yeah.
I once wanted to convene a panel, and I did with the help of my friend John Doerr, called the 5 Smartest People I Know. Who are the 5 smartest people you know?
Oh, my goodness. Why do you ask me such things? Can they be dead?
They can be dead.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
So my favorite reading partners.
Yeah, who would they be?
I like Lao Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher. Lao Tzu.
Yeah. Oh, Lao Tzu. Oh,
Lao
I
Tzu.
see.
It's pronounced Lao Tzu
Yeah.
in China. I love his philosophy. I think he really is one of the ones
Because?
who got it right. Because he is not moralizing. He is not sucked into reason like most of our Western philosophers who dwelt on reason as if it was the be for all, end of all.
Yeah.
And he understands the world as running.
Right.
And that's how it is, and you're part of it whether you're a stone or a human. So I like Lao Tzu.
Right.
I love my Greek author, Nikos Kazantzakis,
Yes.
who wrote a lot of things people know, like Zorba the Greek, but he also wrote things people don't know, like The Savior of the Souls. It's a 90-page treatise on his philosophy of life that is absolutely marvelous. I like the philosopher Hobbes,
Yes.
who lived in the 1500s, because in his Leviathan he set, I think, foundations that are very resonant, again, with, oddly enough, with what Lao Tzu says and with how I see the world moving on in the future. So of the philosophers, I like these. Of my Greek ancestors, I like Thucydides and the Peloponnesian Wars, because I see in there all my friends and all my acquaintances and all that they do.
Which conductor do you like best?
Which conductor of music?
A composer, I'm sorry. Composer.
Well, I'm an early music bigot.
Early meaning?
Early meaning
16th, 15th?
Renaissance, up to early Baroque and medieval. So I really move around with a lot of them. I mean, I'll take French, I'll take Italian ones, as long as they're back before Bach.
Yeah.
You know,
Before Bach.
before Bach. Yeah.
The Unfinished Revolution, human-centered computers.
How did we get to music, Charlie?
And what they can do for us. Because it has structure.
Indeed, like all human activity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to
Charlie.
have you on the broadcast.
Likewise.
Just like